Happy Friday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Liz Wheeler Show. Happy day after Thanksgiving. I hope you had a wonderful holiday. A lot of food, a lot of fun, a lot of family, a lot of football. Hopefully you had some good turkey. Make sure if you had any funny interactions with leftist family members, make sure to drop them in the comment section because I get a kick out of reading everybody's experiences with their liberal families during the holidays. Recently, I was honored to be given the Woman of the Year award by the Clare Boothe Luce Center for Conservative Women, and I wanted to share with you today the remarks that I gave when I received that award. Take a listen.
It is my deep pleasure and honor to present the Clare Boothe Luce Center for Conservative Women's Woman of the Year award to Liz Wheeler.
Thank you. No one's ever given me an award before. It means so much coming from all of you. Look at all of your beautiful faces. Claire, thank you so much for everything that you do for this group. This is a very special group. Thank you, Kimberly. Where's Linda? Where's Linda sitting? Linda, thank you for everything that you do for these young women. It's an incredible thing. Let me set this down. Awkward. This is one of my favorite groups to speak to because there are a lot of organizations in this country that teach young women leadership skills, and that's a good thing. But there are very few organizations that encourage women while being leaders to also embrace your womanhood and your femininity. And this is one of those groups. So to receive this award from you is my honor. It has brought tears to my eyes. I'm so grateful to be a woman. Woman is not something that happened. It was not something I was assigned at birth. It's not something that I merely choose to identify. Woman is who I am. Funny story, flying in here from Dallas yesterday, a woman and her granddaughter, a little 7-year-old, approached me in the airport, and the woman asked if she could take a picture with me, and I said, of course. Just ignore my screaming toddler next to me. And her granddaughter, after we took the photo, said, "Are you famous? Do you live in a mansion?" And then she said, "I want to be famous too. I want to live in a mansion." And tonight, I'd like to share with you what I said to this young girl. But I need to tee it up first for effect, so bear with me. We live in an era where womanhood and femininity are under incredible attack. We have biological men who play in women's sports, who invade our locker rooms and our bathrooms, our most private spaces. Women in the workforce and in government are often reduced to token hires just because they happen to be a woman. Women, especially young women, are told that in order to be empowered or to be free, they must engage in promiscuous sex and then abort the child that they conceive. Women are told that in order to reach their full potential, they must work full-time for a paycheck, and that is where they will find their self-worth and their value, instead of staying home with their children. Women are shamed for wanting to prioritize loving their husbands and raising their children, nurturing their family. And when you lay it out like that, the era that we live in sounds a little bit sad, but it's not new. Womanhood has been under attack for generations, from Betty Friedan and the feminine mystique to the sexual revolution. It's been a long time coming, and there's good reason why. It really makes total sense when you think about who we are as women. Why are these attacks on women happening? Well, we as women play a unique role as God's creation, in God's creation, as part of his merciful plan for salvation. And we play a unique role in a civil society. Now, I suspect a lot of you tonight are wondering about your future. A lot of you are in college. Some of you, I believe, are in high school. And you're wondering, what should I do with my life? What should I do with my career? How do I balance my career ambitions with my desire to be a wife and a mom and to be present for my children? How do I do it? How do I balance it all? Well, tonight, what I'd like to do is I'd like to encourage you to think not about what you're going to do or what you ought to do, but I encourage you to think about who you are first. And from there, think about your role in society. So let's start with you. Each and every young woman in this room tonight, who are you? You are woman. Now you know this because you have eyes. You've looked in the mirror, you've seen your own body, and your body is significant to who you are as woman. You are not a person who happens to be a woman. You are woman. In fact, it's the opposite of what culture today tells us about gender identity. And we can find this if we read from the Gospel of Matthew. We read, some Pharisees came to him to test him and asked him, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason?" And he answered them, "Have you not read that from the beginning the Creator created them, male and female, and said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and unite with his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So it is that they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined, let man not separate." But what does this mean to us now? It means, my friends, that you matter. Your womanhood matters. Because you, as women, are created to reflect the gospel in order to help your family, your husband, your children, our society at large, and the world understand the mystery of God's love for us. Now, you might be asking, how is your body, your womanhood, your femininity, how are we as women made to reflect the gospel? Well, let me tell you the first Bible verse that I taught to my oldest daughter. She's 3.5, and I taught her to recite, "God is love." So she'll run around the house saying, "God is love." 1 John 4:8, and it's so cute. God made you in his image. And since we are all made in God's image, and God is love, you are made in the image of love. He made you to love, and he made you to be loved. He made you to live in full communion of his love with him in heaven. This is the promise of the gospel, is it not? For God so loved the world that he gave us his only begotten Son, that whosoever shall believe in him will not perish but have everlasting life. That gospel is actually reflected in your body and who you are as a woman. I'm going to quote Jason Everett here. He explains this. He says, "Love, who we are created to be, cannot exist in isolation. There must be a lover, a beloved, and a fire of love between them. This," he writes, "is the Blessed Trinity, a communion of persons in life-giving love. God created man in his image and likeness, and this means that in our bodies, we make visible the invisible mystery of God. He is love." Now, what does this mean? God is love, and in his love is a life-giving communion of persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Now, think about yourself. Think about yourself as a woman. Think about your body as a woman. Our bodies as women, and the same is true for men, by the way, are oriented towards a communion of persons. You, in union with your husband, with whom you are one flesh, and that fire of love between you that begets a whole other person. So you, woman, are a living reflection here on earth of that heavenly mystery, of the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You are made by love, for love, to love, and to be loved. You are made to play a unique role that only you as a woman can play in an earthly family to represent to the world the mystery of that Holy Trinity. Suddenly, I bet it makes so much sense why women, marriage, motherhood, sex are under attack when you realize this, that God created us female and he created men male, and for that reason, we are to unite with each other in marriage and become one flesh in a marriage that reflects the gospel itself and is supposed to help us understand the mystery of God's love for us, to reveal the invisible God's life-giving love for us and his desire to live in full communion with us and to make it visible. What an incredible responsibility. What an incredible gift that we as women are given. You as a woman are a sign of God's salvation. That is who you are. So then we turn to our role as women in a civil society. What is the purpose of a civil society? Well, there's a video of me on YouTube from 2016 that I'm not terribly proud of. Not that kind of video. But a video from CPAC in 2016. This was during the Republican primary, the first time that President Trump ran. Remember those debate stages that were full of Republican candidates, President Trump battling with Megyn Kelly, and we were all just glued to the television sets? Well, I had the honor of opening for Marco Rubio on the first day of the CPAC convention, and it wasn't intended that I was opening for Marco Rubio. I was actually supposed to speak at a much later time slot, but his plane was late. And so the organizer of CPAC came up to me and said, "Are you prepared? Do you think you could go on early?" And I said, "Do I want to speak in front of a crowd of 5,000 people versus the probably 250 that are slated later? Yeah, I think I can make that work." So I give this speech in front of a lot of people, and afterwards, I'm in the lobby, and there's media from all over the world coming to watch, to cover this primary. Marco Rubio was one of the final candidates left battling President Trump, and there was a journalist out there who asked if he could do a sit-down interview with me, and I said, sure. And I sat down with him, and I expected him to ask me the questions everyone else had been asking me. You know, who do you think is going to win? Who do you like the best? What do you think of Trump? No, that's not what he asked. He said, "Do you believe in individual rights?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Do you think that we should legalize marijuana?" I was like, "Oh, okay." "No." And he said, "Well, why not?" And I said, "Well, it smells. I don't really want people, potheads that are high, walking around unashamedly. I think it's a net negative on society." Still not exactly sure where the guy's going here. And he goes, "Well, don't people have a right to make that choice for themselves if you believe in individual rights? And if you believe that the government's role is simply to protect people's individual rights?" And I thought about it for a second, and I said, "No, I still don't think we should legalize it." But I gotta tell you, that conversation after we parted ways and I got up and walked away, that conversation kept echoing in my head because I wondered if the guy had a point. Not about smoking weed, but I wondered if there was actually a contradiction in my worldview when I believed that government existed solely to protect people's individual rights, and that's it. Wouldn't the logical conclusion of that be that people could smoke pot anywhere they wanted without a government telling them to stop? And for 5 years, this conversation played in my head. And I finally began to study because I realized that my worldview was actually wrong, that our government was never intended to put freedom as the ultimate end. Because if freedom is the ultimate end, then David French, for example, was right about drag queen story hours and people taking their children to drag queen story hours when he called that a blessing of liberty. He was insinuating that there was some kind of inherent morality to it simply because people were allowed to do it. Therefore, freedom was on the highest plane. You and I know that's not correct. There is no inherent morality in a grown man, scantily clad, gyrating sexually in front of children. That's wrong. It's immoral. It's evil. And so I realized, well, freedom must not be the ultimate goal. That must not be the purpose of a government or our government. And the more I read, the more I studied, I realized, well, that's actually not how our government was ever intended. Our government, from the beginning, was intended to use freedom as simply a stepping stone for something greater. Freedom was never intended to be the ultimate goal. And so I start reading through the Federalist Papers, I start reading Edmund Burke, I start reading all of these political thinkers to figure out, okay, well, if freedom is not the ultimate goal, then what is? What is this something greater that freedom is supposed to allow us to do? And our founding fathers answered that question 248 years ago. They said the goal of a civil society is justice. okay, but what is justice then? If liberty is not license, what is justice? And I searched for the definition of justice, and I find Edmund Burke defined justice as original justice, capital O, capital J. What Edmund Burke meant by original justice was natural law. He meant that our society must be ordered upon objective truth, upon reality, upon God. We were never intended to be a secular society. We were never intended to remove morals from our law or our culture. In fact, generations of conservatives have gotten this wrong. And I say this without animosity, because I used to be one of those people who identified as a libertarian-leaning conservative. Stay off my lawn, let me do what I want. But that's not how our government was ever intended to be. Our government was intended to order society towards something greater, and that something greater was God. And the limiting principle on how government was to order us was to be the law of God. And when I realized that my gut instinct, telling that pothead who was interviewing me that day at CPAC that no, I didn't want him to be smoking a joint outside of the conference hall, I wasn't wrong. It was my thinking at the time that was wrong. And so if we think about civil society as simply a mechanism to order us as a community towards eternity, towards God, then the question of what our role as women are in a civil society becomes much more clear. It is our role to live with our eyes towards eternity, to point other people through our vocations, through our behavior towards eternity as well. And so when that little girl in the airport turned to me and said, I want to be famous too, I want to live in a mansion, I squatted down next to her and I said, do you know what's even better than being famous and living in a mansion? I said, being a wife and a mama. I get incredible criticism for saying this, even in some conservative circles. There's, I'm sure you've heard of it, a movement in the conservative world called the red pill right, who say, well, you advocate for traditional values, but look at you, a working mom. Look at you using your maiden name publicly versus taking your husband's name. Well, not really. My legal name is my husband's name. I just don't tell them. But let me tell you, one of the questions that I get the most from you all when I come here and speak is asking me, how do you work and balance raising a family, being there for your children? And I want to tell you something that my father-in-law observed one time. This was incredibly insightful. He said, when there appears to be someone who has it all or is doing it all, make no mistake, they're cutting corners somewhere. I want to tell you that's exactly true. I haven't done a load of laundry in probably 10 years. And I don't intend to start now. I also say no to many opportunities that would take me further than the probably 100 feet where my husband has my children right outside the door. Because it's incumbent on me, knowing first who I am as woman, knowing my role, reflecting the gospel, and pointing others towards eternity, and using our civil society to make sure that I am playing my role in sharing the kingdom of God. It makes practical decisions about work and life and careers and balance much easier. My first priority will always be to point my eyes to eternity. My second priority will always be to be a wife and a mother and be present to that. And my third priority, as much as I love it, is work. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't work. It doesn't mean that you aren't also called, in addition to your vocation, to use the skills that God gave you to help others point their eyes towards eternity. But it does mean that you remember every time you make a decision about, well, should I do this work? Should I stay home with my children? It means you first ask yourself, what is the definition of love? The definition of love is wanting the best for another. To love my family is not just to feel a feeling of love towards them. It's not just to be obsessed with the 30,000 pictures of my daughters that I have on my phone. I have to pay $15 a month to Apple for how many photos I have on my phone. It's not just a feeling to love. Love is an action. And my presence to my family and to my children, especially in their young age, is critical. Therefore, my rule when I'm determining how to balance work and life is to first recognize that God created that bond between me as a mother and my children because it is what's best for my child. And if I am called as a mother to love my child because I am made by love and for love, to be loved and to love, then I choose not to break that bond with my child. I choose to cherish it because that's what is best for my child, and that is how to love my child. And society will tell you, it's okay to break that bond. They'll be fine. You go ahead and do your thing. You go ahead and take some me time. You go ahead and rest. So what? So we can sit in a cubicle? We won't be taking the material goods, as fun as they are on this earth, with us. The only thing that we'll be taking with us is those precious souls that God has given us to shepherd back to heaven. My number one goal is getting my girls to heaven. And again, when we're talking about your future lives, your desire to be a wife and to be a mother, our body once again becomes reflective of the gospel, of the sacrifice. I mean, think about pregnancy, for goodness sake, and birth, to breastfeeding, to attachment parenting, to the constant service to your children, to the nighttime wake-ups. I don't think I've gotten more than probably 2.5 hours of sleep in the past 6 or 7 nights because my kids have colds. A sacrificial love, willing to lay down our life or our lifestyle for what is best for our beloved, that is what's love. And if you keep that in your heart and you keep that in your mind, then you'll never find a balance. That's not possible. But you will, as Father Mike says, you will have gone a long way in the balancing of priorities. This award from you means the world to me. I wasn't kidding when I said that no one's ever given me an award before. I usually joke and say that the awards that are on my shelf are all the hateful tweets and death threats that I get on a daily basis. And I kind of believe that. But this means the world to me because when you give me an award called the Woman of the Year, I know that you not only understand, but appreciate and cherish what true womanhood is, and that you're standing next to me, striving for the exact same thing. To me, this award means spending this lovely evening with so many of you, and then going upstairs and changing diapers and feeding and wiping noses and snuggling till all hours of the night, doing the little things in love to my family. Because it's in those little things, done in love, that the greatness that actually matters exists. God bless you all tonight. Thank you for having me, and thank you so much for this award. Thank you, guys. You want to do some questions? Yeah?
Yes, so everyone can line up over here, and before you ask your brief question, please say your name, your school, and where you're from.
Tim? It's my producer. Anne? Guys, if you want to ask a question, you have to get up and walk to the mic.
Yes, please come over here.
Hi, Liz. I'm Olivia, and I go to University of Florida. Thanks so much for speaking earlier this month, or earlier in October at University of Florida. I just want to ask you, what's your favorite thing about being a mom?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. It's hard to quantify it because I like hearing my 3.5-year-old give me her reasons why I'm wrong when she wants to do something. It's I'm not even joking. It's so delightful to hear her having her own will and her own opinions and being this whole person that my husband and I created. It's so wonderful. It's so wonderful to see how much my younger daughter is 7 months, so she's sitting and crawling and squawking like a pterodactyl, and it's so wonderful to see the two of them love each other already and seemingly tell each other secrets. And I'm like, oh, I feel left out. They're telling each other secrets because they love each other so much already. I think in the practicality of it, all the snuggles and love are unparalleled, because I knew I would love my baby when I was pregnant, but I had no idea just how much love I would have for these children. But the biggest privilege of all being a mother is the responsibility of shepherding these souls back to heaven, and I'm forever grateful to God for giving me that privilege. Thanks for the question.
Hi, Lucy Spence from the DC area, but I'm a student at Notre Dame. My question is, I think in society today, we see a lot of like a parody of what society thinks womanhood is. And I guess I just wanted to know your thoughts on talking to friends on campus who kind of buy into this parody of womanhood that, you know, isn't the real thing, but that's very appealing in this, I guess, like this kind of fake femininity that is.
Yeah, the
campus.
fakeness comes from both sides, I think. On the left, we're told that in order to be fulfilled, we have to basically ape what men want to do with their lives, which it's fine if you want to. I mean, I do a career, right? I work, but there's been really interesting research on the gender pay gap that shows that women aren't paid less because they're women. They're not paid less because these patriarchal, sexist men are saying, you're a woman, I'm going to give you a smaller paycheck than the guy that stands next to you. The reason that men are paid more, or that women are paid less, is because of choices that women make. Choices like, I want to work fewer hours, I want to be more flexible, I want to go on work trips less often. Essentially, they want to be with their families more than men do. So even when it comes to the length that they're willing to commute for a job, they'll turn a job down that's far enough away that they feel like cuts too much into time with their children. And I find this so interesting like around the mid-April, that all the feminists tell us, you know, we've worked this far into the year without getting paid what the men pay. I always find it so interesting because to me, the gender pay gap is actually a positive illustration that even though our culture is sick, even though women have been constantly assaulted at our very core, our femininity, for a long time, you can't actually extinguish that natural God-given desire inside of you to be a wife and a mom, because that desire, even if women are unwilling to say it, is reflected in the actual choices, the actions that they take. So my advice to anybody debating anything on a college campus is restrain your urge to do a data drop on people. I know I always want to say, here are 50 reasons that you're wrong and the data to back it up. But the most effective way to change someone's mind is to just ask one simple question, which illustrates the flaw in their thinking for them. So if you're talking about women who say, oh, I don't want to get married, that's old-fashioned, I don't want to be stifled by, you know, having a husband, patriarchal, I don't want to have children, that's a burden, I don't want to be tired all the time, I just want to pursue my career, that's what's fulfilling to me. If you're with women that are saying that, just ask them, do you want to be a mom? What does that mean? What do you picture yourself? What do you picture your day looking like? And ask them those questions, because deep down, you can bury it, you can try to extinguish it. Many women have experienced some event in their life, whether it's an abusive man or an abortion, that really puts a shell around that desire, but you can never fully extinguish that desire. And to change their minds, you can just, by using questions, help bring that back to life.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm from Arizona, and I attend. Or was there a specific event?
Yeah, no, it wasn't a natural instinct. I was a competitive swimmer in high school, and I intended to swim in college to get a Division I scholarship and be a competitive swimmer. And then, as all athletes are, I wanted to coach after that. But when I was 16 years old, I was diagnosed with a serious autoimmune disease that caused me to have to quit swimming. In fact, I was very ill for many years. I'm talking in and out of the hospital ill, bedridden ill. And during those years, I felt like my identity had just been completely obliterated, just the rug yanked out from under me, because my identity, while I verbally said my identity was, oh, a child of Christ, I found out that I had rooted a little too much of my identity in being an athlete. And so I struggled. What am I going to do? What is my life going to be? What do I even care about? Swimming was what I was passionate about. It was my past. It was my present. I wanted it to be my future. And I remember just dropping to my knees right by my bedroom window one night when I was sick, probably several years into it, just saying, God, please give me something that I care about. Give me something to fight for. Give me something that gives me purpose. And then along came Barack Obama in the 2015 Republican primary, and I started watching because I was in bed sick and I was bored. And I was like, well, this guy doesn't sound right. So I started reading. I read every book I could get my hands on. I read an entire book every day for several years. And I realized, yeah, he's wrong on a lot. And the day that he was elected, I actually have a journal entry from the day or the morning after Barack Obama was elected. And my journal entry is, God, have mercy on our nation, but thank you for giving me something to fight for. I promise to spend the rest of my life, I don't know how yet, fighting to make our society ordered towards you and fighting against those who wish to destroy it. And from there, I planned to be a speechwriter or something until I realized that poor speechwriters, they write these beautiful pieces of work and politicians say dumb things instead. And I realized that if I wanted to say the things that I was writing, that I needed to say them myself. So that's what I started to do. I go on a book tour and give speeches. And one day, my husband, he wasn't my husband at the time, he was my boyfriend at the time. I had been offered a communications director role on one of the campaigns in 2015, one of the presidential candidate campaigns. But it would have required me to move from San Diego, which is where I was at that time, to Washington, D.C., and I just didn't want to move away from my new boyfriend. So I turned that role down, but I was grousing about the job that I was in. I was tired of it by that point, and my husband says, there's a new television network that actually is right down the road. You should apply over there. And I was like, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. He walked out of the room, and I spent $19.95 to send a LinkedIn in-mail to the CEO of that news network, and obviously didn't hear back from him until 3 months later. 3 months later, early on Sunday morning, before I went to Mass, I get an email from the CEO of this news network, and he said, call me ASAP. I think I have a show for you. And I was like, I've never been on camera before. So the next day I went, it was 15 minutes, the headquarters was 15 minutes away, and I went down, and I talked with him for 5 hours, I think it was, and he asked me question after question after question, not interested in my experience as a television presenter or a media personality, but interested in how I thought about the issues, and did I know how to grapple with those who disagreed with me. After 5 hours, he said, I'd like to offer you a job. And I was like, okay. And he's like, we should probably do a screen test first, huh? And I was like, we should probably try. So we walk into the studio. I sit down at the desk. I was all alone in the studio because these studios, the crew is oftentimes, once they set the cameras up, the crew is in the control room, which is behind a glass wall. And I sit down there, and he hits his little mic from the other room. It sounds like the voice of God coming in. He goes, do you feel nervous or anything up there? And I was like, not really, should I? And he goes, no, if you didn't stutter on that question, I think you're good. Come back next Monday and we'll put you on air. And I was like, yeah, okay. I went home, quit my job, came back Monday, and I was on air the next week. Hosted that show for 5 years. It was the time of my life. So no, it was never my intention to get into it, but God has many wonderful plans that we simply can't imagine. Thanks for your question.
This will be our last questions. You know what? Never mind. We have
can do
two
all of them.
more. Okay.
Hi, my name's Meg Williamson. I just graduated from Christendom College in Front Royal, Virginia. Thank you so much for talking to us tonight. Really appreciate it. Kind of on the point, you made the comment that with the people who look like they have it together and look like they're balancing everything, typically aren't. There's something a little amiss. And my question for you is, as you're balancing things and as you're focusing on what's most important for those you love, I'm sure you probably have encountered times where you question your decisions of working or of choosing not to work. What resources or what do you normally go to when people are almost telling you that you're wrong and you're making these wrong decisions? Where do you find the courage or the people to back you up in your decision making?
Prayer, first and foremost, and then having a husband who, being one flesh, we are not just so in the bodily way, but in heart and in mind. We have decided jointly that this is how I will balance work and life. Having a family who supports my dad. Funny story. I don't think I've ever told this story before. When I first got my job at that news network, everyone was like, "Oh, that's so cool. That's awesome. You're super cool now." And my dad goes, "Yeah, that's a cool job. Just a job." And I have never appreciated a comment more, because whenever I feel that my work is sucking me in too far and I feel too torn between this balance, or I feel that I have overcommitted to work when I should have been more present to my children, my dad's voice comes into my head. Just a job. Doesn't mean it's not meaningful, but it's just a job. It's just here on earth. It's not the ultimate goal. I was also blessed, for better or for worse, with a characteristic in which I simply do not care when other people criticize the way that I do things. I'm happy to share with them why I do it. I would like them to agree with me, but if they want to think I'm weird, go nuts. Amen. Thank you for the question.
Alrighty, hello. My name's Kaylee Anderson. I'm a student at Grand Canyon University. As many have said, thank you again for your time and for being here. It truly means a lot to us. I'm currently studying elementary education with interest in pursuits of ed policy and law. And so given the current education realm and the direction that things looked as though they were going and now perhaps might be going, I'm curious to know your plan for your children and just kind of if you've thought anything about that.
I'm going to homeschool them. I was homeschooled myself, so I'm very familiar with it. I had a wonderful experience being homeschooled. It was something that I took to naturally because I like to do things as quickly as possible. So the idea of, sitting there waiting for other people to learn was not my thing in a classroom. I liked to get up, be like, okay, I'm starting at 7:10. Can I get done by 11? Can I get done before lunchtime? I did it for no reason except I liked to do that. I think that as a parent today, whether or not you were homeschooled, if you're discerning or even thinking and researching about what you want to do with your future families, which is prudent, I recommend that you all start educating yourself about these things. Because once you get into the moment, sometimes the voices can be overwhelming. You're just kind of taken along this current unless you have prepared a paddle to paddle against the current. But some of the things to think about when you are educating yourself about these decisions is obviously the academic superiority. What type of education actually provides the best academic outcome? Is it public school? Is it private school? Is it charter school? Is it homeschool? There are studies that show that it's homeschool. And I understand that not everyone is able to homeschool, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we should acknowledge that if you want the best academic outcome is to homeschool your children. Secondly, when you're thinking about your children, when you're thinking about the purpose of education is not just to cram as many facts into your mind as possible. The purpose of education is to prepare a child to think critically, to prepare that person to be a functioning, contributing member of society. And the purpose of education is to indoctrinate youth. And I always get so many stares when I say that, because I thought we were against this. Actually, the public school system in our country, and you'll read about this in my book, the public school system in our country was intended to indoctrinate children in Christian values, specifically Protestant values, I'm sorry to say, as a Catholic. A little joke here. I know there's always a lot of tension when you make a Catholic-Protestant joke at one of these dinners. And in American values. Because at the time, going back into the 1800s, there was a wave of Catholic Irish immigrants that came into Massachusetts. Massachusetts was the first state to impose mandatory public education, and the purpose was to indoctrinate these immigrant children. They wanted them to be primarily American in their identity, and they wanted to try to convert them away from Catholicism into Protestantism. And this was the purpose of the public school system. Even the highest echelon of politicians and presidents in our country acknowledged that at the time. And oftentimes we don't realize that. We think, okay, our education system is supposed to be this neutral place. You should just go in and you should just learn math, you should learn reading, you should learn writing, you should learn history, no opinions. Let me tell you, that's not possible. We are not neutral beings. We are either in the right or we are in the wrong. And that's the same with our public school system. We are either going to teach our values openly or the opposite values are going to be taught. There's never going to be a so-called neutral playing ground. And so when you're just making the decision about how to educate your children, understand that every institution that you allow your child to be a part of will be part of that child's formation, part of that child's indoctrination. And if you are a Christian and you want your child to specifically to put God first and to live with his or her eyes towards eternity, then you best give them an education that is intended to indoctrinate them in Christian ethics and openly in Christian religious belief. For that reason, I would not send my child to a public school system, and I would not, and I've said this to my friends, I would not want any of my friends to send their children to the public schools, because the public schools right now understand, those who run the public schools, especially the teachers' unions, understand that public schooling is supposed to be indoctrination, and they have a full-throated grip on our children's minds at ages when our children are so impressionable. It doesn't matter how sound their home life is. It doesn't matter if their parents take them to church on the weekend. That poisonous ideology that is inherent in every subject, in every classroom, in every public school across the country will be part of your child's formation. So those are some of the things that I would consider and that I have considered. I mean, I suppose I had the advantage of, because I do this for work and talk about this, I was kind of pre-prepared with my arsenal of, oh, what are we going to do? And I was also comfortable with the idea of homeschooling. And my husband and I are fortunate enough to balance our careers so that one of us is always with our children. We don't send our children to daycare or have outside childcare. And so we'll have the ability to homeschool as well. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to work in the public school system, you are walking into a den of wolves. It's not something Christians should abandon completely, because, unless, of course, Trump abolishes the Department of Education, but we'll get to that next time. But there are a lot of children, the majority of children in our nation are still put through the public school system, so Christians shouldn't walk away from the public school system the way that we walked away from Hollywood, because we saw what happened in Hollywood. We completely abandoned it to the wolves. We don't want that to happen, because so many children still do go to the public school system. But you'll be battling the cultural forces in that school and with the minds of these children. And I encourage you to remember first who you are as a woman and what your purpose is in civil society. And if you look at your work in the public school system through that, then you will be a blessing to those children. Thank you.
Okay, this will be our last question.
Hi, my name is Hannah Bechtel. I'm a politics student at Liberty University right now. You just had a very wonderful conversation about education, and that's one of my big priorities as a politics student. I'm very passionate about that. With public schools specifically, do you think there are any reforms that could possibly rectify that situation that's going on, like you talked about? What sort of things would you like to see come out of that, if there were to be anything?
Well, I'm super based on this. I'm much more based on this than any Republican politician that's in office. I would probably abolish the public school system and start over from scratch. This is why I'm a commentator and not a politician, because politicians can't say things like that. But the public school system as it stands now is a net negative on society at large and a net negative on children. Even if they learn academic subjects, what else are they learning? And what is being proficient at math and being proficient at critical race theory are not morally equivalent. One is fine and one is bad. One is moral and one is immoral. So if our public school system is a net negative on society, then why do we have it? What is the purpose of it? There are many other institutions that can be used to teach children how to read and write and do arithmetic. So that's primarily the most base view is, yeah, I would just abolish it all and send it back to parents in the private sector. If that is not going to happen, then I would reclaim the public school system as it was intended. I would reclaim it and say, yes, it is a tool of indoctrination. That's exactly what it is. And we will indoctrinate children in American values and in Christian values, because what we hope for them is to be contributing, patriotic members of society and of the kingdom of God. And I would orient all curriculum towards that and remove any curriculum that contradicts that. Thanks for your question. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for having me.
What an honor it was to accept that award. What a really special night. I'll always have that memory held close in my heart. The women who are part of the Clare Boothe Luce Center for Conservative Women are truly remarkable women. They're lovely ladies, and I enjoy speaking to them at every opportunity that I'm able to, and talking to them and learning from them. So thank you again to them for the honor of giving me the Woman of the Year award. Guys, if you have not already subscribed to the show, please do so. Go to youtube.com/Liz Wheeler. You can hit the subscribe button there. Then make sure you hit the bell so that when I have a new episode, a new interview, a new video, you can be notified. Sometimes YouTube buries me a little bit in the algorithm. Why? Why would they do that? What topics could I possibly be talking about on a regular basis that they don't like? Well, you know the answer to that. So make sure you hit the bell so I can notify you directly and we don't get censored. Over on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, search The Liz Wheeler Show. Hit the subscribe button on both of those. That way, when you're in the car, you're driving to work, you're dropping the kids off at school, whatever, you're going to the grocery store, you can pop an AirPod in, you can listen to the show in audio format. It really helps other people discover the show when you subscribe on the audio podcast platforms too, because it helps bump it up in the ratings, which helps other people discover it. And make sure you subscribe to my newsletter. My newsletter, you can go to lizwheelernewsletter.com. Drop me your email address. Right now, what we've been doing is every day that we don't have a show, we are sending out a newsletter with everything that you need to know for that day, whether it is the research from the prior day's monologue, whether it is articles that I'm reading, whether it is links to content we think that you need to know, things the mainstream media might not be reporting. It is chock full of information that we know you like it. We see the open rate. We appreciate every single person who's reading this newsletter. It's growing by leaps and bounds, and we're very excited about it. So go to lizwheelernewsletter.com, drop your email address, be part of this, be part of our newsletter. We're so appreciative of all of you. I was saying to the team right before we filmed that, every year I feel grateful for you guys for making this show happen, because it's not just me. It's not just me and Tim, my producer, who I am also grateful for, but it's all of us together that make this show possible. So thank you for being a part of this, for joining me and being a disruptor in the media sphere and pushing back against mainstream media propaganda and social media censorship and all of that kind of stuff. Thanks for standing by me. There's nobody I'd rather be standing next to than you guys. That is what I am grateful for this year. So as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.